Yeah, good evening, Mayor and City Council. This is a second reading. We heard the first reading with a lengthy presentation at our first meeting in January. As a reminder, this is a renewal of the half-cent capital improvement sales tax that has been in place since 1994. We are recommending, staff is recommending City Council to put this to a vote to the residents of Warrensburg to renew that half-cent sales tax for another 20 years. So it would expire in 2045 if it were to be approved. Just recalling the things that this money has been used for in the past would be things like the City Hall remodel, the Hamilton Street construction, the police department building, our public works street barn that we have. Things that we need these funds for in the future would be other street reconstructions that we need, stormwater repairs, large equipment such as fire engines and snowplows, as well as other new public safety facilities in the future. As we've discussed, sitting down with our department directors, the needs that we have in the community are very high, and this sales tax would generate about $2.5 million annually. We would have to, of course, prioritize the needs that we have, and approving this approving the renewal a year in advance of when it expires will allow us to start strategizing our plans for prioritizing those needs for our community. I'm happy to stand for any additional questions from the governing body. This is, again, second reading, so this is the approval that we will need to put it on the ballot. We will get it over to the courthouse tomorrow afternoon before 5.
Everybody have questions?
No questions.
No questions.
No questions.
Okay, Danielle, can this be used for streets or is it just for hard capital?
It can be used for streets, yes.
Okay, there's just one of the options out there.
Yep, those, I think that's one of the primary concerns that we have.
Every time, exactly. Okay, move for a motion for a vote.
Move to approve that ordinance second reading by title, and I beg your pardon for jumping in.
Okay. Actually, it was read the first time last meeting. So would that be moved to adopt or reject?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
And that was Councilmember Osborne, correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, this is for adoption or rejection. Osborne,
Yes.
Euler,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Number 8, other business, and a resolution.
Now I believe there is 7.1.
Oh, I missed that one,
Mayor
sorry.
Kushner, sorry.
It's because we're so far away. Oh, 7.1 is an ordinance amending Division 5 of Article 6 of Chapter 2, Section 2-583B Boy of the Code of Ordinances concerning the Nancy J. Anderson, Charles W. Stevenson Scholarship Endowment Fund. Ms. Jody.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council. As we discussed several meetings ago, the scholarship had been set up for the employees of the City of Warrensburg employees' children who are attending college and receiving vocational training. The scholarship has been in place since 2001 and has been generously donated to through 2018. The donations have not been received or are not anticipated since 2018. And the issue was due to the lack of donations and the restrictions of the fund. This was brought to your attention. You gave us direction at that time to bring back legislation to amend Section 2-583B to continue to award future scholarships. The amendment, though, would set the scholarship award at $1,000 per year and remove the fund balance restrictions to allow a spend down of the fund balance. It's city staff recommendation to approve this amendment. Please note that any future donations will continue to be accepted and the principal balance shall continue to be invested as set out in Section 2-584 of the city's code. Are there any questions?
No.
Motion to move to second reading by title?
Thank you. Osborne,
Yes.
Euler,
yes,
Jones,
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Okay.
Now
And
we'll do it.
An ordinance amending Division 5 of Article 6 of Chapter 2, Section 2-583B of the Code of Ordinances concerning the Nancy J. Anderson, Charles W. Stevenson Scholarship Endowment Fund. This is for adoption or rejection. Osborne,
Yes.
Euler,
yes,
Jones,
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to 8.1. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri, approving the Warrensburg Historic Preservation Community Plan. Miss Carol.
Thank you, Mayor. Get my video on. And I think Gary is going to promote in as a panelist Nicholas and Peggy. So they are our consultants with the Lakota Group out of Chicago and are joining us by Zoom tonight. They've been working for the last year to complete and develop the Warrensburg Historic Preservation Plan and have a short presentation for you this evening regarding that plan. They have been excellent to work with. Kristen Dyer, our city planner, has worked directly with them and managed that contract and assisted with the project. And so she's also on the call this evening, but I think Nick will kick us off with the presentation. We do have a full copy of the plan in the council packet that is posted online. So it is available. It is a lengthy document, but it is available online for anybody who's joining us this evening online. If you found the Zoom link, you found the agenda. And so it is linked there in that agenda if you wish to read the document. And with that, Nick should be ready to go, I think.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. For some reason, I can't find my camera. Somehow the camera's kind of disappeared. So I don't know if at least you can hear me, correct?
Yes, that's just this is just something I asked of our department directors. Nick, you're fine.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Nick Kalogeresis. I'm an associate principal with the Lakota Group. And I'm joined virtually by Peggy Varigan, who assisted me on this project. And I do want to say thank you to Barbara and to Kristen for helping us during this process. It went incredibly smooth. We had a really nice planning process, and we did get a chance to talk to a wide cross-section of the community during this process. So our conversations with the community has resulted in this historic preservation plan. So we're going to give you a sort of a quick drive through the plan, and we'll take questions. So if we go to the next slide. Great, thank you. So the purpose of a historic preservation plan, a historic preservation plan is like any plan that a community undertakes and adopts. It helps provide background for making good decisions about how the community grows and develops. A comprehensive plan tells us how we're going to grow and develop and where. historic preservation plan tells us what we want to keep as we grow and change as a community. So as part of this process, there were 5 main objectives. One is to assess the existing historic preservation program. It has been around for a number of years, and there's been a number of accomplishments with that. So we wanted to take a close look at it and see what we need to fine tune or change as we go forward. This planning process also allowed us an opportunity to talk to the community, to conduct some community engagement. And then from that, from listening to the community, we were able to determine some key preservation priorities for the future. We also wanted to look at how does historic preservation integrate with economic development, because historic preservation isn't just about saving old buildings. It is about how do we make them useful economically. So we wanted to take a close look at that. And then last, we wanted to create an implementable plan. So there is an implementation action section in this plan that gives a good roadmap for the future. So if we go to the next slide. So the preservation plan has 6 sections in it. We'll do like I said, a fast speed tour through the plan, but the preservation plan itself is in section 3. And the following sections talk about implementation, talk about what resources and buildings and sites are important to the community. And section 6 talks about how we administer the preservation program currently. So if we go to the next slide. So just to talk about the introduction to the plan, that's the first section. We do give a description about what the preservation plan is about and what does it do. We do give an overview about what preservation is about, and also the history of preservation in Warrensburg. As I said a moment ago, there is a history of preservation in the community, and there's a lot of great efforts that have been undertaken with your Main Street program, with your Historic Preservation Commission. You have 2 historic districts, so we wanted to make sure that the community knew about that history. And it's encapsulated in a timeline. And then we also talk about the various benefits of historic preservation. I mentioned the economic development aspects of preservation. There's a lot of different aspects to it in terms of community sustainability, in terms of maintaining our community's history. So many different benefits. So that's the introduction to the plan, comprising section 1. We go to the next slide. A little bit more about the planning process. As Barbara mentioned, it's almost been about a year since we started this planning process. And the planning process was divided into 2 phases. The first phase is the state of the city, where we actually assess what's happening in the community. And we actually started this process back in May. And we came on site to do a lot of photography and walk around the community. And then we actually came back in August to do a series of stakeholder meetings and a public workshop. The stakeholder meetings occurred over 2 days, and we met with a wide variety of people in the community, from property owners, downtown business owners, to the historical society, to the local schools. They were very, very productive meetings. And then phase 2 is when we actually sat down and wrote the plan. We submitted a draft plan back in September. Then we came back a week after Thanksgiving to do another public workshop, which was very well attended, and we had really good feedback. And then we delivered a revised draft back in late December. And then we submitted a draft for a joint Historic Preservation Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission hearing in early January. I do want to say during phase 2 is we also had a consultation process with the State Historic Preservation Office. This plan is funded through a CLG grant provided by the SHPO's office. So we had a consultation with them, and we received comments from them and incorporated them into the final draft that you see in front of you today. So if we go to the next slide. And as part of the engagement process, just to give you a summary, as I mentioned a moment ago, we did host a series of stakeholder listening sessions back in August, and we had 2 public workshops. As part of those workshops, we had a priority setting exercise where we asked attendees to tell us what they think the priorities for preservation should be. And then we had a big map exercise where we asked people to tell us where in Warrensburg is important, what are places and buildings important to preserve. And out of those two workshops, we did we did find out, there are 4 top priorities from the community. The first one being an expanding heritage tourism. The second one being converting the upper floors in downtown buildings to residential. The third being expanding education and outreach initiatives. And then last but not least is raising awareness of Warrensburg history. So promoting, what's important in history, and that being really significant because of the nature of Warrensburg's population, where we have a significant segment of the community that lives here temporarily from Whitman Air Force Base. So how do we get them to be more involved in and taking more ownership and preservation locally? So if we go to the next slide. So the top priorities that came out of this whole planning process, one, and as I mentioned a moment ago, recognizing Warrensburg's heritage, and not everyone in Warrensburg knows about the deep history in this community. There's a lot of different historical facets and histories. And how do we get more people to recognize that and understand that as being very key? And how do we get more people to take ownership in preservation in the community? And then protecting and revitalizing important places like downtown, the neighborhoods. Those came out very important as high priorities for places we want to preserve and revitalize. Third is engaging the Warrensburg community in preservation. How do we get more people to participate and understand preservation? And then the last priority is how do we strengthen the program? You do have a lot of good things going for you in terms of your Historic Preservation Commission and your partners that you have, but there's ways in which we can strengthen that and enhance it in a lot of different ways. So if we go to the next slide. So the preservation plan itself, that section is really comprised of a vision statement. It really encapsulates what's our goal in the next years. So we're looking 10 years in the future. And then we have 8 preservation planning principles. We have 4 preservation planning priorities, which I just talked about. And then we have 4 preservation planning goals, which I'll talk about here in a moment. And then we have a section on just strategies and implementation. How do we do these things? So if we go to the next slide. So there are 4 main goals in the preservation plan. And the first goal is identifying and recognizing important historic buildings and places as priorities for preservation. So the community has, as I said, 2 historic districts, a number of landmarks. But the one thing about historic preservation is that, first of all, history moves forward. And so now we're looking at buildings that are built in the 50s and 60s that are important to preserve. But we do talk about those places that we need to look at and consider for future historic districts. Goal number 2 is how do we promote economic development and neighborhood vitality? We do have a focus on adaptive use. There are a handful of properties in Warrensburg that we believe that the city and the community should focus on. These are properties that are very iconic, like the Mule Barn. And how do we find a way to reuse those buildings? And so not to let them keep sitting vacant and deteriorating. But so we do have a handful of buildings that we think the community could really focus on and serve as economic catalysts for the community. Goal number 3 is how do we do ongoing outreach programs that tells Warrensburg's heritage stories? And again, it's really the need to try to promote Warrensburg's history. We had a great session with the local schools, and the local schools told us that they don't teach local history to students. And so there's an opportunity in which we can teach people about Warrensburg history so that they have a higher awareness and appreciation of that history, and maybe they can be future preservationists down the road. And then the last goal is promoting the stewardship of Warrensburg's heritage through enhanced preservation approaches. We do talk about a number of ways in which the commission can strengthen its operations. And so that's the focus of that goal. So if we go to the next slide. And just to talk about implementation, we made the implementation section fairly straightforward in terms of we divide all the recommendations into high priority implementation actions, in which these are actions that the commission, the city, Main Street, the Historical Society, the university, and others can potentially partner with and implement. So we think those are projects that should happen in the next 1 to 3 or 5 years. And then the second level of activities are ongoing implementation activities. These are programs and initiatives
Uh-oh.
the commission and its partners can work on an ongoing basis. So we divide the implementation according to level 1, high priority, and then level 2, ongoing implementation. So if we go to the next slide. And then going into section 5 and 6 of the plan, as I've said here, section 5 talks about the heritage resources that exist in Warrensburg. We just provide a history of Warrensburg and some of the important periods of that history, where a lot of our buildings and built environment date from those periods. So we're just trying to give background on what's important for Warrensburg to preserve. We talk about your different resource types from residential to commercial, industrial, educational. So we give a background on that. And then we also give a background of what you've officially designated or recognized. And as I've said earlier, you have 2 National Register Historic Districts. You have 7 individual properties listed in the National Register. And I do want to mention that the National Register is an honorary designation provided by the Missouri SHPO and the National Park Service. There's no strings attached to that, although commercial buildings are eligible for tax incentives. So the National Register can play a key role in adaptive use and revitalization. And then you have 2 locally designated landmarks. Those are landmarks that you created through the commission and the city. And then there's been 5 survey projects that have happened in the past. And surveys are important because it allows us to understand what historic resources we have and what's important to preserve. We go to the next slide. And as part of our recommendations, we do provide a map, a future survey area map. The area in red is portions of Warrensburg that you've already surveyed. But outside that red, the red zone, the red box, are future survey areas that we think you should take a closer look at. And these survey projects can be underwritten by a CLG grant through the state or through other sources. So you don't have to do all those surveys in 1 year, but over the next 10 years, these would be good projects to undertake. Within the red area in the blue zone are older surveys that you may want to revisit at some time. It's always good to revisit old surveys just because things change, properties change. We lose properties sometimes, so it's good to redo those surveys at some point. So if we go to the next slide. And we recommend some potential National Register districts and landmarks. We do think your post-World War II subdivisions are very interesting and they could be National Register districts. Yes, places built after World War II are now considered historic, so they're worth looking at. The Old City Cemetery, the Cheatham House, and then a series of properties along Broad and Grover Street that are worth taking a look at and could be future landmarks. So if we go to the next slide. And then last but not least, as we have the last chapter focuses on program administration. So this is just some background information about the current context for preservation in Warrensburg. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, although we do mention disaster preparedness as a topic that the city and the commission should take a look at because we're all experiencing increasing disasters, ice storms, hurricanes, and floods. And so we need to start thinking about how those disasters impact historic resources. So if we go to the next slide. And then the plan at the very end includes a series of appendices. Those are just background information. I do want to point out the third bullet point. We took a look at your historic overlay district zoning, and we reviewed it and provided commentary of where we think some revisions should take place. And these revisions are meant to help strengthen the ordinance to make it more effective. This was requested of us by the Missouri SHPO to actually do an analysis of the zoning ordinance. So we conducted that and we included it in the appendices. Next slide. And I think that's it. So thank you very much. I know Peggy and I enjoyed working with the community, and we thank you for the opportunity to help develop this important document for you. Thanks, and we'll take any questions.
No questions?
No questions.
No questions.
Sounds like a good plan. Barb, do we have any updates on the update in the ordinance?
No, we don't have any updates on updating the ordinance yet. We do have a resolution on your agenda this evening that would accept and approve this plan as it's been presented and included in your packet. So staff would recommend approval of that. Happy to answer any questions if we need to. And then once we have this adopted, Kristen can get busy and the commission can get busy with looking at those recommendations and moving forward with the implementation steps.
Okay. Well, if there's no further questions, then we need a motion.
Are we
Motion.
moving, are we
Yep.
moving on the resolution?
Yes.
Okay.
This is
I-
a resolution to approve the historic preservation plan.
I make that motion.
Osborne,
Yes.
Euler,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have is a resolution authorizing the destruction of records held for the required period based on Missouri adopted records and retention schedule. Miss Jody.
Ac-
Actually, Enrico.
Enrico asked me if I would fill in for this since it's pretty much all IT records. This is just a collection of paper and digital records that have reached their retention period, and we can delete as per the Secretary of State's record schedule.
Okay, questions or a motion?
Move to approve the resolution authorizing the destruction of records.
Osborne,
Yes.
Euler,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Danielle, you'll have to tell us appearances to the council not listed.
I do not, there is no one here to address you this evening.
There's somebody with a hand up.
There is someone with a hand up. Who has their hand up?
It just says Ash.
Ash?
Yes. Let me go ahead and.
Yep.
Oh. She is unmuted, or this person is unmuted, I'm not sure.
Ash, this is your time to address the governing body. Please state your name and address for the record. Carrie, is chat enabled?
I did, and I sent her asked if I could help, and I haven't gotten a reply.
Hand went down.
Hand went down.
Okay.
Mayor, let's go ahead and move on, and if we hear back from this individual, we'll let you know.
Okay. Miscellaneous matters from the mayor and council. Any council member have anything to bring up?
No.
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 Other than the public works boys have been busy. things that seem to be doing well. It's a busy week right now, so, okay, with nothing else, city manager report.
You know, Courtney, I think we should let you go first, and we can talk about the finance year-end report and the first quarter analysis.
All right, thank you. I'm trying to adjust. I should have done this before. I didn't know I was going to end up on the video, so I apologize for my attire tonight. I'm here at City Hall, sitting right across from you guys. So thank you so much, Mayor, Commissioners. The year-end report is, of course, the unaudited. The auditors were to be in last week. We still wouldn't have had the audit numbers, but that was postponed. They will be in starting on January 30th, so next week. And they will be here through Friday, February 2nd. It was due to the weather, and it just worked out better for everybody to go ahead and move that. And they had an opening and could also give us the same auditors we'd had last year. So that continuity can be very helpful. So just wanted you to know. So the year end is just giving you an analysis of what had occurred during the year. I have found several mistakes reading my report again, though I read it several times. Jody and Danielle can tell you I finished my reports at 3:40 a.m. on the day that they were due to go out to you guys. So that was my problem with not doing my timing right. But because of that, there are a couple of errors on there, which I will go through with you. But overall, the general fund, those revenue estimates ended up, you know, whether one is higher and some are lower or whatever, that is very typical. You're only estimating your revenues. You are not budgeting your revenues. You just cannot budget expenditures that are higher than your estimated revenues. So actually did wonderfully. Don't need to use any money from fund balance to cover the expenses of the 23 budget. And we came out to a 0.09% increase in revenues over expected. I mean, that is like perfect. So we did extremely well in that, and that all looks really good. You know, some of the revenues were a little high, some were a little low. You can read that in my in the cover letter from the city manager and kind of see what those were. I will say I'm very surprised at how very, very positive your franchise fees are. Most cities are getting a continuing decrease in their franchise fees, particularly on the Kansas side though. But you know, that is really nice to see because that gives you a nice third income source besides property taxes and sales and use that is really there for you. On the grants are just a function of how the city is currently budgeting its grants. As the grants are accepted for a certain year, they're going into the budget, but there's no relationship between that and when the departments are actually applying for their reimbursement. Sometimes even from when the expenses were incurred. So we do have funds. I talked to each of the department heads, and we do have funds coming in 2024 that were for expenses in 2023, just so you know. So those things are never going to be balanced out. It's just kind of an estimating and then telling you what's coming sometime in the future. But they, you know, the departments do a really good job here of going out for different grants. They're really proactive about that. And that's a really good thing to see. Because a lot of times cities aren't getting as much in grants because they just don't have time to apply for them. And your department heads and your departments are really working hard on that. Licenses and permits were way over what the estimate was. I mean, almost $250,000 due to the rights of way permits that were sold were way up, and building permits had a healthy increase too. Public safety is down from what the estimate was for the third year in a row. You can see that in some of the reports that I've given you. That's just due to the SRO. costs, the school resource officers. The goal is to have, 4 positions, 3 would be really healthy. And due to the vacancies that the police department has had, have been unable to give them more than 2 officers for the last couple of years, but the budget has been predicated on having more officers than that. So it's not that anything's gone wrong. It's not that the city is spending more money and not receiving it back. The school district pays extremely quickly and very efficiently when we do bill them. So there is $100,000 of billings that have been credited to 2024, which the auditors will credit back to 23. So you'll go from that little tiny 15,000 to 115 to 120,000 in that line item after the audit, which will, reflect better what those billings are. So overall, it's looking really good. Your fines were healthy. In fact, the court brought in a lot more than was, compared to what was estimated. So that was, that's good, I guess. I guess we'd rather not have people having to go to court. So again, fund balance, we didn't need to use any fund balance by the end of the year. And so, we're going to see that changing in a very positive direction. Expenditures in the general fund for the departments and divisions that are all separated out are looking really good. They spent less than $709,000 of what was actually budgeted for them to expend. The different departments and the different divisions did. And then this is where the big error is. It says the year-end encumbrances were $150,000. If you looked at my encumbrance sheet, you would know that that equals $190,000, not $150,000. So don't ask me. I just sleepy. Because there are 3 encumbrances in the general fund, which are included in the fund balance report, but is not included in these numbers because they were not recorded for that report that I had written. So there's $145,000 for the council's visioning process. There's a very small $5,500 in community development, which is for Tyler Technology, some work that they're doing. And then there's a $40,000 encumbrance for the finance department, which is earmarked for training. The finance department uses a financial system that they have not been trained on officially. So it's been several years of learning as you go. And so we're going to start some actual training with the company to actually be more efficient in our time and our use of that system. And I don't think it's going to cost the whole $40,000, but we will see. And if not, it'll just fall to fund balance where it would have been anyway. So, but we are working on that. Our first training is for 4 hours of training for everyone in the finance department and HR, and that is $6,000. So it came in much lower than I expected. For the other funds, the Parks and Recreation, one of the things that you'll see is a theme here is that the city has had, at least under the prior finance director, because it was not happening before that, but has had a policy of not moving fund balances. So while you guys would budget an amount, that was never moved over in the finances, in the Encode system. And so it always shows up like it's not there. And it's just a matter, it's more of a accounting thing that the auditors then do. The auditors then adjust that amount in to make them whole, because you would never want to be negative. You can never have more expenditures than you have revenues. So that's just a little quirk that's been done here. And so you will see that in every fund that had any kind of fund balance, that none of those were moved over. And so, but I've talked to the auditor and they assured me, even in some of the funds that weren't big enough to go through all of this, such as the ARPAs and the general obligation, that those funds are all there. They know where the money is. It's just not showing in the Encode system, and they will be adjusting those all over. All of the fund balances will be positive, and you will get a fund balance report in the financial audit that shows you exactly what the fund balances are in every fund in the city at the end of 23. So that'll be a good thing to know. Park department did really well. They did have some lower admission rates, but then this was also offset by savings and expenditures because you didn't have to spend as much on supplies and other things when you had lower admission rates. So overall, they did a nice job. We did encumber $75,000, which is not reflected in this report, but which is reflected in the fund balance report. And that was for pool work. The pool work was supposed to be around 135. There is a encumbrance for 175, but it ends up that as the park director, Chris Deal, has been working with the company, looking at the engineers on looking at what needs to be done on the indoor pool. It looks like it may be closer to $250,000. So we went ahead and encumbered $75,000 towards that to make that we could meet the whole 250,000. So we got that taken care of. The Warrensburg pollution control, I always want to say water and pollution control, but I know that's not what the W means. Estimates were really good for this fund. The only reason why there's any negative on any of these reports, again, is because the fund balance was not transferred over before the end of the year. The other thing is that there is a really large savings in expenditures. As I explained, it's not very typical to budget your depreciation. It's not really real money, right? Depreciation isn't something that you expend. It's a loss in value to what you own. And so that's a little different. Usually if you're going to show some kind of a depreciation as an expenditure, it's because you're taking that depreciation amount and then moving it into a reserve fund for replacement of that equipment or building that is part of that depreciation. That is not something that has been happening. They've just been budgeting the depreciation. So that's not real money. And so it's also not real expenditures. So you're always going to see WPC looking like they really underspent, but it's really related to that. We did do an encumbrance for $18,000 at the request of the department because they were supposed to have an increase in their 24 budget in one line item. It was supposed to be increased another $18,000, and it did not occur in the last presentation to you all, to the council. So we did go ahead and encumber that out of the savings that they had this year to go ahead and reflect that so that they have the full $35,000 they need for an engineering contract that will be expended here in 24, though it was entered into in 23. The Convention and Visitors Bureau, it looks a little strange. There was a typing error, I believe, a recording error where they put the issuance of a grant as a negative in their account. So that kind of throws off your revenues, and then it did not show the expenditure, the $70,000 expenditure in the expenditure. So in reality, those two things are going to even out, but it does look a little funny, particularly with that big negative in the revenues. So that was, I believe, just a typographical error. Everything else, I think, is looking really good. As I said, I've spoken with the auditor about several things that I was a little confused about, and he assured me that they understand what was happening and they're going to be moving these things. And then we are going to talk about what is a more transparent way of doing this in the future. So we will talk about that with the auditors. Does anyone have any questions about the report or about any of the information?
This is Bruce. I'm I was pleased to see that only 5 of 21 departments had increases. The others, and I know some of these you have to have. So I was really impressed that 5 out of 21 had increases. I saw that the 7% real estate, that where we kind of overestimated that. Is that something we'll change in the future, maybe?
Well, typically, your property taxes are a function of what the assessor has determined is going to be the assessed value versus the appraised value, the appraised value and then the assessed value, which is a formula. So I'm assuming, I don't know this, I have not seen the documents. I'm assuming that was an assessor thing. I'm not real sure the average growth rate was, when you look at the history, it's usually 3 to 4.5%. So I'm not real sure what happened. It obviously didn't come in. It may be that those were the assessments, but because of such a jump, some people won't be able to pay all of their property taxes in a timely manner when they have a big jump. So it may be that that's just an increase in delinquencies because it was a greater increase in assessed value than what would be typical. And so you might see an increase in your delinquency payments here this next year as people catch up with that. So I again, it should just be a simple function, a straight over function from what the assessor gives us as far as information and then what we put in there.
Great. Well, thank you. The other thing that impressed me was that reading this, revenue estimates were right on target. It was off by like less than 0.1%. It's amazing.
Yes, it was. That was an amazing thing. Usually you're going to see it a lot more than that. 5% one way or the other, over or under, is much more normal than 0.1%. So it definitely all evened out, and no fund balance was needed at all. So
that's
it worked out really well.
We appreciate your work and your finance department, Courtney. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I will carry it over to them. I had nothing to do with any of this. I was just doing the analysis, but yes, it turned out really well. So that was
Courtney,
good.
this is Jim. I've got two things. First off, I really like the improvement on the reports and with the explanations out on the sidebar. It makes it a whole lot easier to understand and see what's going on. And then the only other thing I there's a question on ARPA money.
Yes.
On it showing we've got a 1.4 negative on it.
Yes.
And the beginning balance was 32. Is that reimbursement or?
No. So the ARPA money is, I had to call the auditor on this one. And, because I've talked to Rachel and I've talked to the others, and I'm like, it's not showing up in the encode system. Okay. These reports are all coming out of our financial system here at City Hall. And so what you enter is what it's repeating out, right? It doesn't have anything to do necessarily with what's in the bank. And so I had to call the auditors and go, okay, what wasn't done? What should I have done? What do I need to do? And they just the auditor just kind of laughed, and he goes, no, this is just a function of, that there's money that is not shown, but that you guys were awarded, and, ARPA money, you actually get the money. And then you have to verify what you've spent it on. So the money's here, it's just not showing in the encode system. And he didn't tell me where it was. He just laughed and said that when they do their audit, they will be moving the money over. And I was like, okay, because
you gotta love Tyler Technologies.
Yeah, it's just a little scary though when you're coming in as a stranger and you look at it and you go, why do these people all have negative fund balances? But so it's just a matter of where it's being kept and that whole thing. When you look at the fund balance report, you can see too, remember we had talked earlier, it used to have depreciation in the fund balance report. So that really threw off the whole, let me find my fund balance report. There it is. So I could see it bigger. it threw off the bottom line. If you remember, it was like $100,000, but about 50,000 of that was that. So now we look at it and we see this 49 million, which is actually low because we've got two negatives in there. So we have the ARPAs and we have the, what's the other negative? Oh, tax increment financing. Again, we only pay out what we receive in tax increment financing. So there should never be a negative there. So they're going to have to look at that one because we should, it may be a function of not having moved everything over journal entry wise before she paid out. When she writes checks to the actual developer, it may just be a function of that. I am still working on the TIF to try to figure out what all has been paid, what was actually owed versus what was paid, and where we are in that. I have been, communicating some with Mr. Franklin about the fact that I'm so sorry I'm delayed, but I'm still trying to get my grasp around. I'm actually doing a look back all the way back to 2016 when it became, and going forward to make sure that everything was paid that was supposed to be paid and was taken care of. But it is a function of what you get, you pay out. What you get, you pay out. You should never have a negative. So, but most of that, all of that money gets collected in the general fund. And then when you're going to pay it to the developer, it's supposed to be moved into the TIF fund. So I think the negative 36,000 is related to not having made that move, but going ahead and writing a check. So we're working on that and we will get that straightened out. But the auditor was not concerned with these. He said that this was not uncommon since he's been working with the city. So it was just
good.
unique. So,
Courtney, this is Bruce. When do we expect the audit back?
So the audit's supposed to, now we did postpone it by, a couple of weeks, but, the report that in their contract says it's the end of March.
Okay.
So when we start the budget process, really start getting into it in April and May, we should have audited numbers by then.
Thank you.
That's quick.
I thought that too, Jan. That's exactly what I thought. I thought that is so quick for an auditor, but that's what it says. He may want to buy a couple of more weeks now that we had to postpone. So, but it's very quick turnaround.
Okay. Next, Danielle.
I will turn it over to any of the other department directors that would like to address the governing body.
And I'm sorry, did you want me to do first quarter?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead and do first quarter.
Okay, I'm sorry. Are you guys tired? I can not talk about it. I'm sure you read it. There's not a whole lot in first quarter. It was completed. You've got the data there. Things are doing well. The property tax that is looking quite high for this time of the year, I mean, almost double, is because according to Carrie, I talked with Carrie who talked to the county clerk, and they were amazed at how many people paid early this year, paid like in November instead of waiting until December 31st. So we received the money as it came in. So we got more money early. It does not mean we will be receiving necessarily more money, but just it was a timing situation. So don't want you to look at that and think, oh my gosh, we're going to get all this extra money. It doesn't look like it. It looks like it was a timing thing. Everything else, it looks good. Hard, we aren't spending a whole lot in some of the accounts at all at this point in time, just because of the time of year. Of course, it's going to look different at second quarter. Look at all the ice and snow control Public Works has had to do. That's going to affect their budget, those kinds of things. But overall, I didn't see anything that I was concerned about in what we were seeing in any of these numbers. We should see better sales and use tax as we get the holiday shopping. Interest has not been distributed. That is totally on finance. That is totally on me. Rachel is the person who is helping me part-time, and she does that. And we have been so busy with year end to get it all ready for the auditor, not your report, but the auditor's trial balances and everything, that we didn't do that part of it. We were like, let's get this all done, then we'll worry about the interest and setting that out. But everybody will get some interest. I mean, we've been earning interest, but we need to go through those investments and figure out and then divide that out among the different departments. So we will be doing that. Expenditure wise, things are looking really pretty good. You know, I did put in the details. I've got some questions to myself. I apologize for that. But, you know, we only have one right now that is an unusual expense, which was, had a negative impact on the budget. It had a very good explanation. One, it's miscoded, so it's in the wrong line. So that would be why it looks like it's unbudgeted. But two, we had an emergency for the HVAC system there at the, council chambers. And of course you would like to have heat and air conditioning. So it was replaced and repaired or whatever. And so we will move that to the proper place, and then it won't look funny like it does. But everything's been very, you know, very understandable. Have talked to the departments, asked them multiple questions on things as I was going through, and just didn't see anything of any concern at all. So if you guys have any questions, though, I'd be happy to answer them or find out for you if it was a question I didn't think to ask. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, do any of the department directors want to address the governing body?
Yeah, I had one thing. Just wanted to, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Just want to point out, I was in the city manager report, but a little bit of good news, a little bit of money. We did receive notification here last week that we got just shy of $10,000 from the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation to purchase a couple of emergency cameras. It's a big win. We've been applying for that for every quarter for the last several years. Just had varying amounts, so we found the sweet spot that seemed to found it this time. So excited to receive that award.
Great.
Very good.
Okay. If no one else has anything else they would like to share, I would just end tonight's meeting with thanking you with your patience. Weather has been a challenge in January. So we have rescheduled our joint work session with the Traffic Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission to discuss or to hear them report out on the community input that we got on Rethink McGuire, as well as hear that technical analysis that they have been working on Rethink McGuire. We are getting to that. We really need to get that information in front of you. We know we have a tight timeline. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for being flexible and allowing us to schedule that special meeting next Monday. We really do appreciate it. We didn't want to delay it another 2 weeks. So appreciate that. So that will be 6 p.m. on January 29th. If nobody else has anything additional to share, that's it for us, Mayor Kushner.
Well, if nobody has anything else, we will be done at 8:01.
Okay.
Adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.